Hello, everybody. My name is George Shurikan, and welcome to the Lights on Data show. Now, I do want to say data is growing faster than ever, but so are the challenges in managing, securing, making sense of it. And those organizations are looking to scale, to adopt AI, and ensure digital resilience. Those traditional approaches to data management are kind of failing. So joining me today is Kamal Hathi, Senior Vice President and GM at Splunk, a Cisco company. Welcome, Kamal.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, George. I'm excited to be here. Obviously, as you said, I work at Splunk. I'm honored to run products, technology, and overall that business. And it's part of Cisco, and amazing opportunities there to combine what Cisco does for the world, the network, connectivity, and all the data that flows through it, and unlock that insight, the value to really make what we call resilience, digital resilience, security, observability, just making sure that the infrastructure that you're working on, applications are running up 24 by 7, bulletproof all the time. And that's an exciting mission to be on.
I'm looking forward to unpack that even further, and I'm so delighted and honored that you're here with me because you're a visionary technology leader, and you have a proven track record of building transformative products that really help businesses thrive in this increasingly complex digital world. So again, thank you.
Thank you. That's very
And
kind of you.
and I'm really looking forward to dive into the evolving landscape of data management, as I was
Sure.
mentioning, and the rise of AI powered insights and what organizations can do to reduce complexity while increasing that value. So, Kamal, let's start with the big picture first. Data management, right? We mentioned it's evolving rapidly, and organizations are facing new challenges as they scale. From your perspective, what are the biggest shifts in how companies now approach data management?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, it's almost a paradox. On one end, companies are spending a lot more on data management. Like,
Hmm.
we did this data management report, a survey. We talked to our customers. That's like the only really source of truth is what our customers tell us. And more than 91% of organizations actually are spending a lot more on data management. But if you ask them, like, what do you get back in return? What's the ROI? And it's very hard to answer that question. So there's this real problem of spending more but not really figuring out
Mm.
what the return is. And so I think it's really about how to just handle this complexity. The volume is growing all the time. AI, it's actually exploded the volume, the type, the variety. We talked about big data. This is like, I don't know what this is. This is huge data now, and there's more and more compliance pressures now. If you go globally, even in the wherever you happen to live locally, and so it's become an interesting thing. And the most important piece, really, that at least I think, and Splunk's taking the approach is, how do you really get value in terms of analytics,
Yeah.
in terms of forensic search, and really finding the nuggets in this growing sea of data, and do so in a regulated, compliant way, so that you can actually use it for your business.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. I think that's a great view of where the landscape kind of lies in, and I want to unpack a little bit more of the challenges. And you mentioned a few of those, and how do we get that value out of those AI powered insights, and how do we get them in the first place, right? And like you mentioned, there's challenges with managing the massive data volumes, and ensuring that data stays usable while also secure, but also accessible. Can you talk a little bit about that? On what challenges, what other challenges have you seen?
Yeah, I think especially in terms of AI, I think it's really interesting to think about how do you sort of really manage to provide that value, and companies are trying really hard. They're really trying hard to deliver um, you know new evolving insights with AI. And what we've seen in our survey and our feedback from customers, like 98%
Hmm.
are trying to use AI in some fashion
Hmm.
with data management. And it turns out that just from a point of view of um, you know, what does AI need? Like, what is sort of the lifeblood of AI? And it's data.
Right.
And it's data not just in terms of just larger amounts, but it has to be clean, it has to be accessible, it has to be, I said before, compliant. And so that's really important. Now, in an interesting way, AI itself can help streamline the operation of data that's required for AI. It's kind of self-referential.
Mhm.
It's almost, sometimes we talk about this notion of AI power to power AI, and that's really important to get a head around. And so, how what can we do there? And so, one of the strategies we talk about a lot is this notion of federation of data, like combining data without having to suck all of it into some giant system. Because what happens is that the volume, the complexity, the cost, you don't want to constantly worry about getting to the data in some giant system at a prohibitive cost,
Right.
but really you want to be able to pull it from wherever it happens to be, and then that becomes a very important and critical part how we can leverage especially with AI.
That's a very good point because one of the biggest pain points that I keep hearing from organizations is also how fragmented their data has become,
Yeah,
because it's spread across clouds and departments and tools and really slows everything down. Analytics, collaboration,
right.
decision making. And like you said, data federation might be the answer, and it's definitely gaining attention as a solution. And I've noticed in your report as well that those that have adopted it, at least partially, they're already reaping the benefits. So, for those that are less familiar with data federation, can you
Yeah,
please describe what it is and why is it becoming essential for the modern data
yeah.
management?
So increasingly, this is not just about something new, but there's been a trend of what we say, get the compute to the data. And it's really
Mhm.
important. Instead of moving large amounts of data back and forth between systems, it at some point becomes prohibitive. It's unscalable, it's slow, it costs a lot. And so this notion of being able to work directly where the customers have data lakes, data stores, and there are many of these in most customer environments, and do so by delivering analytics, search in one place, governed and secure. So you have one, if you will, single pane of glass for analytics and search, sitting on multiple different lakes of data, sources of data. And so this was what you call federation, being able to do a distributed processing of data where it happens to be, compute where it happens to be, and then combine it into value, into analytics, into search in a federated way. Hence the word federation. And that's something that we've been seeing a lot, and that's something we are investing in a lot now. Most of our customers are asking for this, and so this is really important from a data management point of view, because it really not only allows you to work with you know, large diverse data, but it also saves costs quite a bit. And in the report, what we're seeing is customers actually have been talking about this kind of federated data management strategy as being a critical part, because it secures, it provides governance, it scales, and then it provides this notion of working with
Right,
AI in a certain
right.
better way. And that's what we've seen. What I think high degree of returns when customers do invest in something like data federation.
Right, right. And yeah, again, I know there's a lot in your report as well. And one of the things that I remember is that I think more than 50% of those customers improved their data governance as a result of data federation. 67%
Yeah,
reported faster access to it, and 47% strengthened their compliance posture. Anyways, there's so much more. I don't want to give it all away. I want people to go in and get
yeah,
that
yeah,
ebook, that report, because there's so much to it. Kamal, the way I kind of think about data federation as an analogy, I sort of see it as this universal remote control for your data.
yeah,
If I don't know
yeah.
if people listening are familiar with the universal remote control, but you basically have all these different devices, and instead of having a remote for each one, you just have one that you program. And for our data, you can kind of see and use the data from different systems as if it's all in one place, while it
Yeah.
actually stays where it originally lives.
And sometimes you think about it as if you think about your how you work with your computer, they're like shortcuts. These are
Mhm.
shortcuts that you just link and you get there, but they are not physically there. And people are used to this notion of shortcuts. And federation is just shortcuts for your data, if you will.
Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I like that. And again, I think the benefits are clear from what you describe.
Yeah.
Um, but like any strategic approach, implementation matters.
Yes.
So, what are some common pitfalls that organizations should avoid when adopting a data federation framework?
Yeah. I think look. in any implementation technology, there's always that pitfall of thinking about the tools first. Let me get a better, nicer,
Right.
you know, whatever happens to be the fashion tool of the day. So it's really important not to focus on tools before strategy, or ignoring governance, or ignoring security. Like those things you need to get right first, and then I think there becomes sort of technical aspects. There's a trade-off between latency uh, and cost and capabilities. Every time you think about data being spread out in different places and then being combined, as opposed to being a single system, there's a trade-off of cost to how much time does it take. And even if it's really
Right.
quick, as scales go, so there are those technical capabilities that you need to trade off. And then when are you willing to pay a little extra, if you will, to have the data uh, persisted in one place versus being federated every time? So those are interesting trade-offs you need to worry about. And it turns out that most of the organizations that are working with this aren't that well equipped um, to sort of handle these kinds of mandates or strategies that require this to work effectively. So that my repeat is just don't worry about tooling and technology, but get the strategy right, and then we get into technology. Look at the practicalities. How is it going to work out? What is the scenario that you need to go solve? How quickly is data required, etc., etc.
And with the strategy, Kamal, do you start with the business strategy first, and then your data strategy sort of needs to align to it, and those are the steps that you should take?
Yeah, I think it's always about what value you want out of this. Why are you doing it? So that has to be answered very, very clearly and importantly. And the business strategy and data strategy many times are like intertwined. They're not that separate, because the business needs to be able to react to some security type scenario. They need to react to changes in business, in inventory, in the global supply chain. So data is increasingly a key part of the business. So that's, from a strategy point of view, really, really important. I think that the other way of looking at data is in terms of how we're going to approach it in its organization itself.
Hmm.
How are we going to tier it? Because sometimes you need to think about data tiering as an important piece of what data is required immediately. So it's hot, what is maybe is more historical, and is warm or cold, and these are the things we're used to in the industry. But as we look at this notion of approaching large amounts of data and their implications as federation, it really becomes really, really important um, as we look at having a clear strategy. And I think we've seen that when leaders have a clear strategy, it really yields significant benefits.
Hmm.
Large cost savings, and then over 50% of the guys of the companies who are leading tend to have a very crisp and clear strategy versus those who don't. And in fact,
Hmm.
it's interesting enough, when you do something like data tiering appropriately, when you end up having a clear strategy of where the data lives and when do you need it and how to get at it and how do you combine it, what's now, what's historical, there actually is a reduction in the cost overall of storage, even as data volumes might be growing. So I think it also leads to business performance improvement, because now the data is accessible, the right place, right time, get the right insights, and it actually leads to, we've seen something like 69% of respondents reported improvements in profit margin, and just in terms of things like sustainability, all kinds of business value rises when you have a clear, well articulated data strategy, especially tiering it appropriately, combining it when required, etc.
Thank you. And I remember seeing that in your report as well, the data tiering and the benefits that it brought to companies. Yeah, as I was mentioning, a lot of insights there. I'll make sure to post a link to it
I'm
so
sure.
that people can
Absolutely.
download it, read it for themselves too.
Yeah.
Yeah, avoiding those pitfalls is key, like you mentioned, and it definitely leads us to a broader challenge that many organizations faced, and that's how to make that data more accessible across teams without letting costs spiral out of control. And I think data tiering is one as well. Are there any other strategies that you would recommend that businesses can implement to improve access to the data?
Yeah. So I think, look, here's a few things. Um, Access is really important from many perspectives, and it really matters because data is also security in some senses.
Mm.
Access to data, who has, who doesn't, uh, you know, where, what role do you play, and there's this notion of you almost need some granular access, security, understanding of who can get
Yeah.
data where. But that's really important to have that again in your strategy overall. Really important. Um, I think the other thing in terms of the kinds of things we should be focused on, we talked about before, compute to data, not data to compute, not moving it around, because that also has implications actually on security. The more data you copy around, the more implications there of who has access to what, almost in a inadvertent way. So that's really important. I think there's this aspect of um, you know actually having KPIs, having metrics that you establish upfront that talk about things like security, what kinds of threats exist around infrastructure, and using the data for that. And so it's sort of an important requirement that you're not just thinking about data strategy in isolation, but in the sense of you know you said access, but I think security
Hmm.
is a very important piece. And
Hmm.
the interesting point of view again is that it's not just about securing the data, but data provides you insights into security. So again, it's one of those self-referential things. The more data you have, the more correlations you can make, the more you can understand, what kinds of potential threats exist, and then leverage the data to really provide that solution. So I think overall, having we talked about federation, data tiering, managing data pipeline so that it's always available, reliant, secure, and then just the overall life cycle of data is really
Hmm.
important. And that's what we've seen the leaders in this space think about data management in these sorts of aspects.
Thinking out loud now, I really like what you said about data security and what that focus should be. And yes, data access with data security sort of come hand in hand, but I like the focus on data security a bit more. And it's because I feel this way we can enable data democratization across the organization
Yes.
while having that security in mind. So yes, we can enable it to other users, other teams and units to be able to access certain pieces of data because you never know how useful it might be to them otherwise, but while keeping in mind the data security of it all.
Yeah, I mean, we sometimes this term of
Hmm.
insights with oversights. So you want to unlock the democratization you talked about, the insights, but you want to maintain oversight. And so it's available, but there's some degree of security, control, governance, etc.
Right, right. Love it. So of course, all of these are kind of only part of the equation. I think the other critical piece is leadership overall, especially navigating this complexity, driving alignment to the strategies, the business overall, and fostering that data-driven culture. From your perspective, what are some key characteristics of today's most effective data management leaders? And
Yeah.
I'm asking because I think others can really learn from how they're operating.
Yeah. I think we talked about a lot of these. Having a clear intentional data strategy. It's really important.
Right.
Before jumping into technology and tools, and we talked about this data tiering. Making sure that you have a clear approach to bringing compute to the data, the data federation approach, um, the intentionality of having clear metrics, KPIs that are focused on the both the use of the data, but also security and resilience of the data. And so, what we've seen is that the leading organizations combine these things together. They are very clear about the value they're delivering. To your point, they're clear about unlocking it, making it available to everybody. But at the same time, when you do that, you must make sure that the data is available, so it's resilient, and that's important. It's secure, there is the ability to get at all the data, not just islands and silos, because it actually turns out that having just a partial view is worse than having no view.
Right.
And so this notion of federation that we talked about allows you to have an end-to-end holistic view of your entire data estate, and then building correlations, getting insight, etc. And so all these things, this combination of federation, pipeline management, data cycle management, uh, and then weaving it in with a clear business strategy is what we've seen leaders do a really, really good job of.
Nice. And do you see this as that's how they start from the beginning, or do you see them learning by trial and error? Is there any trends that you've noticed in the industry?
Yeah.
Some that are maybe some industries that are doing better than others for whatever reason.
So, so the value of these kinds of reports is that you don't do it by trial and error, right? The really sort of effective leaders look at what everybody else is doing,
Hmm.
and they tend to build on it. And so when you provide these kinds of insights, these kinds of reports, they actually are meant to avoid the trial and error. They're
Right.
much more geared towards saying, here's what I've learned, here's what works, here's what doesn't. Please focus on these things. And then, of course, you got to try it out and then implement and see what value you get. But the whole point is to avoid the errors part, and then allow you to try with some degree of belief that this is going to work, and because someone else previously has tried it. So that's the thing that we've noticed a lot is people, the really good practitioners look at what's worked and then build on it. And the things we talked about are what we've seen from a very large subset of people, uh, and we are providing this information in a sense to go and build on.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I want to bring focus to that as well because we mentioned a couple of times, but Splunk recently released this report that dives deeper
Yeah,
into many of these challenges, best practices, some of the strategies that you mentioned as well, and of course the results that we're seeing from all these leaders in the industry that are doing things better. They're doing things the right
yeah,
way. So
yeah.
it's called the New Rules of Data Management report. I'm gonna put a link to it somewhere here. Of course, it's going to be in the show notes. What really stood out to you from the report?
Yeah, I think first of all, the fact that the 1,400 IT engineering, cybersecurity professionals across many different industries provided this input. And what really stood out is that customers are looking actively at their data strategy. It's really important to them to align this to as we talked about, business goals. And so that's what's interesting to see, that as the landscape is changing, they are trying to stay ahead with the growth of the data, getting better visibility, getting better insights, and across the totality of the digital footprint, not just sales or marketing or um, manufacturing, but it's the totality that really comes in together. That's one thing that stood out. The second thing was really interesting to see, is that, um, in fact, the the leaders, uh, the customers who embrace the kinds of things we talked about around federation, tiering, business practices, security, resilience, all up, observability, they actually are overcoming these data challenges. They're seeing
Hmm.
better results, better business results, not just results in like, hey, like my data's there, better, faster, but no, actual business results are improving. And that's really, to me, was fascinating to see that direct correlation between a good, strong data management strategy that had the ability to handle the totality of the data in a secure, governed, tiered way actually leads to better business outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to just underline again something that you said because that's one of the things I usually look into one of these reports. I go towards the end or in the beginning, wherever
Yeah,
it's being mentioned, and see, okay, well, how many people were being interviewed or
yeah,
surveyed about this? And it was over 1,400.
yeah.
And that's IT professionals, engineering professionals, cybersecurity professionals, and I think it was, from what I remember, across 16 industries. That's like
That's right.
huge margin. And
Yeah,
yeah, I really appreciated how it was highlighting what leading organizations are doing differently.
right.
And to me, and you mentioned this before, reports like this is helping us learn from the best or learn
Yes.
from what others are doing best. And again, it has a lot of goodies and stats to that I think not only you learn from, but it kind of helps you build your case to improve your data observability, your data security, and yeah, again, learn from those best practices from other organizations that improved on these challenges that we talked about before?
I think especially in this world of AI, I mean, this is the fuel. Data is the fuel that powers AI. If you want to succeed in AI, you have to succeed with data,
Right.
and that's something we've clearly seen. And that's where the value in the future is really going to be the unlock that's critical.
Yeah. Kamal, being a data management, data governance professional myself, that's one of the things that I appreciate about AI in the past couple of years. The fact that I put more focus on this foundation that needs to be put in place. We need to
Right.
have strong data governance, strong data management practices overall, so we can get that value out of it, so that AI could use it. And yeah, like you also mentioned, it's somewhat ironic that now it's also AI that's helping us do these
Yeah.
things better, get that foundation right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the Lights on Data show, and showing us how to master this new era of data management, and getting those insights in front of everybody.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed the conversation. I can't imagine, how quickly this time's gone by. I'm looking at the clock, and wow, it's already, it's past time. So thank you so much for having me, and I hope the audience got some value out of it.
Appreciate it. Well, until next time, let's keep putting the lights on data.